Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com. And tonight we're going to talk about the cycles of history. So welcome to the reprehensibles. Welcome to the unauthorized, to the VFM, to the Dreadvilk, and of course, a warm welcome to the Bears. So the reason that I want to discuss the cycles of history is because it's very common to assume that future events are going to proceed much as current events and the recent past. Now, the thing that's a little bit confusing about it is that this is true up until it isn't. And what got me thinking about this was the recent reports that the Chinese had been delivering aid as well as a number of troops to Venezuela. Now that may or may not be true. The Chinese apparently have actually denied that. But we do know that the Russians, sorry, showing my age there, the Russians have been delivering an amount of aid, and they've also have a small number of troops there. And it's interesting to see people's reactions to this because you have a number of people who are just saying, oh, well, USA, the U.S. military will crush them. And others claiming that, no, it's not a boomer slip. It's called Generation X. Get it straight. If you look at the way that people think about the U.S. military, they still think in terms of a monopolar world. They still think in terms of a world where the U.S. military can exert its will and nobody can do anything about it. And that's essentially the world that we had for a very, very brief time around 1945, between 1945 and 1950, really. And then again, beginning with the fall of the Soviet Union around 1989, 1990. And so, but these things never last. You know, I'm reading Charles Oman's History of the Peninsular War. I'm just finishing volume 4. And it's really interesting to see how the Spanish ulcer, as they called it, was completely beyond the ability of the dominant European power to control. You know, they conquered all of Spain relatively quickly. And yet, a single British army was enough to keep them out of Portugal. And nobody expected this. You know, nobody really except Wellington truly believed that it was possible to defeat Napoleon there. And yet they did. And it's really fascinating to see how the French marshals and Napoleon found it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to accept what was actually happening. And I think that we're in a similar position with the United States now. I think that we may look back and see that what happened in Syria, where for the first time, the United States was completely unable to enact its will. They were unable to do what they did in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Libya, where they managed to force regime change on those countries. And that was the explicit goal in Syria. And yet they were unable to do that. Obama's gone, Assad is still there. Now, that was partly because of Assad's own doing, but it was also partly because of his support from the Russians, from Iran, and from Hezbollah. And so it's potentially significant because if you look at all of the other indicators of the state of the United States, if you look at the economy, if you look at the demographics, if you look at the fact that about 35% of all profit goes to the financial sector. It's totally useless. Totally sucked out of the useful, productive economy and is just, you cannot possibly claim that the financial sector is somehow making things more efficient or something when it's taking 35% of the profits out. It doesn't work at all. And so at some point in time, we know from history that at some point in time, all empires fall. All empires collapse. They can go on for a long, long time. The Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe for a long time. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was considered to be on its last legs for a long time. See, this is what's kind of funny. Oddrob says, they could have destroyed Assad if they wanted. They do have the firepower and manpower. It would have required an invasion. But see, that's where you have it wrong. Napoleon had the manpower. But the people were simply unwilling to submit. The section that I was just reading was discussing the siege of Tarragona and the fall of Figueras and the taking of Montserrat. And those were the three big fortresses left in Catalonia after Barcelona had been conquered. And the French were completely convinced that once they took those three fortifications, that was it. Catalonia would be pacified. But they never pacified Catalonia because the Catalan people refused to accept their defeat. And, we've seen that in, obviously, Afghanistan. We've seen that in Iraq and so forth. But what's particularly striking about Syria is that they didn't even manage to force the regime change that they wanted. And that's where it starts to get interesting. That's where you start to see that they don't have the same sort of abilities that they used to. Now, there's a lot of different theories about these cycles. There's the business cycle, there's the Keynesian cycle, there's the Kondratiev cycle, and so forth. And when you look at these cycles, there's a certain pattern to them, and this is a way that it's described that is kind of useful. This is just a general description of the historical cycles. After the population reaches the ceiling of the carrying capacity of the land, its growth rate declines toward near zero values. So in the United States, where they had an open frontier, you had almost unlimited growth. That's why it was possible to have all these immigrants come in, because there's plenty of place for them. There's plenty of room for them to live, plenty of area for them to live in their own towns, in their own cities, and so forth. But again, as they reach the ceiling of the carrying capacity, which is pretty clearly where we are now. California's running out of water. The topsoil is not what it should be in a lot of the agricultural communities and so forth. The system experiences significant stress with decline in the living standards of the common population, increasing the severity of famines, growing rebellions, etc. Now, obviously, there's no famines and there's no rebellions in the United States, but the level of stress is very high. Peter Turchin, who chronicles these things, has said that we've now reached a point in the United States where the level of societal stress is as high as it's been since the early 1860s, which is when the Civil War was fought. So there's this tremendous amount of societal stress that everybody's feeling. And some of it is from the changing demographics. Some of it is from the increased urbanization. Some of it is from the fact that real wages are still lower than they were in 1973. Most complex agrarian systems have considerable reserves for stability, which the U.S. does have. However, within 50 to 150 years, these reserves were usually exhausted, and the system experienced a demographic collapse, which they describe as a Malthusian catastrophe, which is probably a little bit strong. But when increasingly severe famines, epidemics, increasing internal warfare, and other disasters led to a considerable decline of population. And then, as a result of this collapse, resources are freed up, per capita production and consumption increase, and a new socio-demographic cycle starts. So we're looking at this, we're looking at this demographic cycle like that. The most famous example of this, obviously, is the Black Plague in Europe, where about a third of the population died. And as a result, it freed up, it freed the serfs from the land, caused wages to rise. We saw the development, economic development, and the Renaissance, and so forth. Now we've got some developments that have prevented us from sliding down into one of the troughs, the cyclical troughs. Some of that is modern medicine. Some of that is the ability to inexpensively produce food. It's really interesting. We used to spend, in the United States, we used to spend 17% of our income on food. Now, the average is 6%. And in some ways, it's been great. If you go into a supermarket, the selection is amazing. You can find all kinds of fantastic foods. Of course, you can find all kinds of crap too, but the selection that you find in the supermarket is probably on the order of 3 to 4 times greater than it was when I was a kid. I can remember when the supermarkets just suddenly began to start expanding, and then, they started bringing in, some of it was bringing in ethnic foods. Some of it was bringing in lots more selections of fish and meats and all that sort of thing. And it was really incredible. It was really amazing. It's been interesting over here in Europe because we've seen similar developments. When we arrived over here, it felt like the supermarkets were 10 to 15 years behind the U.S. ones. Now they feel like they're about 5 years behind where the States was 20 years ago. So it's interesting to see, you know, how the selections have changed, and it's actually been observably bad for the kids. You know, we've seen the little kids get fatter over the course of 20 years. And, you know, what does this have to do with the cycles? Well, it means that we're still obviously in the high end of the cycle. We're still able to, there's still plenty of resources for everybody. But you can see that the vulnerabilities of the system are growing. If they're flying in fruit from Africa, if they're flying in, you know, vegetables, or you know, if they're growing vegetables in an arid part of California that they can only grow the stuff because it's so heavily irrigated, that's not going to continue forever. It's not going to go on forever. And so we have to be aware that the world is going to change, and it's going to change probably in the next 10 to 15 years. We don't know exactly when things are going to break down, but we know that it is going to probably break down faster than we think, faster than we like. And so, you know, that's why it's so important to do things like raise your own chickens, eat your own eggs, have your own garden. You know, ideally have some reasonable access to clean water. And, you know, we simply can't count on things that we've known all our lives. We can't count on the fact that, you know, the world has gone from a bipolar to a monopolar to a tripolar world just in my adulthood. You know, I've seen that all happen. I don't subscribe to the fourth turning theory. It's interesting, and it's possible that that's relevant, but I find that a little bit out of control. So yeah, I'm gonna nuke some of these idiots. Yes, I do think the Amish tend to be ahead of the curve. So, so it will be interesting to see where we end up with this, because I don't think most of us are really prepared for this in any way, shape, or form. The fourth turning is a generation-based theory. I've read John Glubb's essay, of course, The Fate of Empires. And the thing that is a little bit crazy about it is that a lot of these cyclical numbers all seem to be pointing to the same thing. I predicted back in around 2004 or so, I predicted that the United States was probably going to break apart around the 2033 timeframe. And that's because if you look at the average lifespan of a currency, it's about 70 years. And the U.S. turned to a new form of currency. It went off the gold standard in 1973. So you add 70 years to that, you get 2033. Now, it could be before that, it could be after that. That's just an average. But, you know, when you look at anything, even the length of the government system, the United States and the U.S. Constitution is one of the oldest current political systems currently operating in the world. That means it is getting towards the end of its lifespan. There's the whole John Glubb's theory, 250-year theory, and so forth. And so I think it behooves us to understand these things, and to, and if you look at everything from the constant drumbeat of the U.S. must invade Syria, Iran, Venezuela, and so forth, you get the idea that those who want to make use of the U.S. military for their own purposes are very aware of the fact that it's not going to be in any shape to be so used for long. The U.S. could invade Venezuela successfully now if they wanted to, if they chose to. I don't know if that's still going to be the case in 10 years. And so I don't think the UN is trying to accelerate a collapse. I don't think that people understand this. I already said, don't ask questions that I already answered. If I've been talking about stuff and you came in late, don't ask me about it. Watch it later. So this is interesting. There's a couple different folks that divide these technological cycles differently. They talk about the Industrial Revolution starting in 1771, the age of steam and railways in 1829, the age of steel and heavy engineering, 1875, the age of oil, electricity, the automobile, and mass production, 1908. And then they say the age of information and telecommunications, 1971, but I don't think that that's the significant part. I think the significant part is the airplane travel and the fact that it is so easy to travel from one place to another now, much, much more easy than it used to be for the entirety of human existence. I think that is a bigger change than information and telecommunications. And it's interesting here too, because they're trying to figure out what comes next, because they're talking about the financial agricultural revolution in 1600, then the industrial revolution, technical revolution, scientific technical revolution, information. Then they said, well, what comes next? What comes after 2015? And the answer, I suspect, is nothing. I suspect that we're at the end of this. I think Robert Prechter and the socionomists are probably correct, and we're at the end of this great 250, 300 year wave. And so what we're likely to see is a very serious collapse of the entire neoliberal world order. And that's two of you just asked amazingly stupid questions. But how are we who didn't start with you to know what you did or didn't address earlier? You came late, moron. So if I was talking about something on the topic, don't ask about it. Just listen. The chances are good that I already addressed that. Okay? It's not difficult. If you get here late, don't ask questions about what we were discussing earlier. It's not difficult. I mean, I understand you can't all, even though I stream at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, every day, I'm a little late sometimes and so forth. And we had the daylight savings recently. I understand that. But I've streamed at pretty much the same time every day for the last 5 months. So if you happen to come in late, just don't ask questions about stuff that are related to the topic if you think there's a reason that we would have discussed it. It's not difficult. So, yeah, and then there's also, you can rewind. Kyle says, stop responding to stupid questions. You understand that almost all questions tend to look kind of stupid to me, right? I can't tell the difference between what the average person thinks is a smart question and what the average person thinks is a stupid question. I have to answer them all because I can't really tell the difference. Most questions that people ask me are not necessary. They almost always have all the information required to figure it out, but they ask anyhow. It's okay. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But anyhow, S. Goglin has a good point. What's the point of the comments when there's so many you can't read them? Well, that's why it's always very tempting once you get to 30,000 to just go, permit memberships, because then only members can comment. But, it's, Lin Yen Chen says, this is the first stream of yours that I've entered. You're still new to me. There are no stupid questions, only stupid people. I might be stupid. My questions are not sentient or sapient. Actually, stupid doesn't necessarily imply sentience or sapience, but I'll accept that. The point is that there are certain things like my 2033 estimate for the breakup of the United States, that it is totally freaking obvious that I have discussed many, many, many times before. And so you don't need to ask about it. If you just heard it for the first time, and I say it's something I've been predicting since 2004, you don't need to ask why. There's videos devoted specifically to it. There's posts devoted specifically to it. So, anyhow, I don't know what we're going to do. And I don't know what we're going to do about the membership thing, because frankly, I much prefer people to get memberships to the unauthorized. We don't necessarily want to be reliant upon Google. I mean, we saw what happened to Owen. Why should we permit memberships and have people, actually ask people to pay $5 to Google when there's a very good chance that Google will just keep it and so forth. So, anyhow, so to get back to we actually covered most of the cyclical subject. I mean, there's other cycles too. There's the Ciceronian political cycle, where you've got the transitions between democracy, aristocracy, and empire. But I don't think that those are particularly relevant. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, we're heading into a dictatorial period, or we're heading into a period of aristocracy," but I don't think that those things are necessarily relevant when we're talking about a potential grand supercycle crash. The way that if you're not familiar with socionomics, the way that it works is positive social mood, the growth of wealth and debt and peace and kumbaya and happiness, that tends to move in 5-wave cycles. So 1 is up, 2 is down, 3 is a really big one that goes up, then 4, then 5. And then when things crash, they tend to go down in 3 waves. So 1 wave down, a rebound, and then a 3rd big wave down. It's all fractal, which makes it really hard sometimes to tell whether you're in a retractionary wave of a bigger positive wave or whether you've entered a downturn. And so it's very difficult to tell, but there is reason to believe that we did hit the peak of a grand supercycle around the turn of the century. And if you look at what's happened since then, especially since 2008, it's the first time, 2008 was the first time in 62 years that debt ceased to grow. Yeah, that's what I was describing is the application of Elliott waves from technical analysis to societies. Does it work to predict things? It works a little better than pure randomness would tend to indicate, but it's way less reliable than most people would like to believe. And so, but what concerns me is something that is not based on any of these theories. I used to track the total credit market debt. I don't anymore because they changed the definition around the 2011 time frame, and so there's really no, you can't compare it very accurately anymore. But what was interesting is that for 62 years, every single quarter averaged very, very close to 2.5% growth in debt. So debt was just growing very, very steadily for 62 years. And then with the 2008 financial crisis, the system broke. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it hasn't continued. And this is what's so confusing, because a lot of people were predicting inflation. A smaller number of people like me were predicting deflation. And what did we end up with? The accurate term is credit disinflation. And what that means is the amount of credit is still growing, but it is growing too slow to keep up with the necessary amount required for the economy to grow. And so it was really interesting to see that, and we're still in that period. That we have not gotten, we're something like, last time I looked at it, we were something like 17 trillion, or an entire economy worth of missing credit, missing debt. And so that's why I don't know how much longer they can keep kicking this can down the road. At a certain point in time, the fact that 30 different people, 50 different people all have a claim on the same dollar is going to make a difference. We just don't know how, and we don't know when. There's a lot of people who say that this has to do with the U.S. reserve currency, and that the Chinese and Russian plans to break the SWIFT monopoly will have a fundamental impact on that, but we just don't know. We have no way of knowing. All we know is that the current stagnation cannot continue forever. It's just not going to work. And so when you put all these things together, when you put the military stagnation, the flat birth rates, the changing demographics, all of these things, the sum total is not good. I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether the economy will crash right before Trump's reelection. I don't know that would make any difference anyhow. We'll just have to wait and see. But anyhow, let's take a look at the super chats here. Grace Bear sends $2 and says, "My real support is my premium to unauthorized." Excellent. Thank you. It rocks. Yeah, we're really working hard on, not just keeping going what we're doing, but continuing to improve it. So look to see some, another edition or two before the end of the month, and hopefully some apps around that time frame. MD Erickson throws in a couple bucks, as does Ryan Smithwick. Thank you, guys. Clovis says, "Any plans to replace Discord?" No. A mild traditionalist lost his server last week. The worst thing he planned was organizing rightist normies. We have plenty to do as it is. Someone else will have to do something about Discord. I don't even use Discord, so it's not exactly a priority for me. M. Anthony Dunn says, "Can you see a huge wealth transfer with oligarchs relocating to another part of the world, similar to the movement of big finance from Britain to the U.S. in the early 20th century as the British Empire crumbled?" I think that was the original plan, was for a transfer to China. I think that plan is now off, as far as I can tell, because the Chinese don't appear to have shown much interest in playing along. I think that there's something up with New Zealand. I think that there's you've heard about a lot of people trying to move there, and these whole new gun laws, and there's a lot of high weirdness going on with regards to New Zealand. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Not a lot of oligarchs share their plans with me, so I don't really know what's going on with them. What I do know is that they certainly seem to be aware that the United States is not going to be very friendly to them in the near future. Christopher G says, "You mentioned in previous streams that you don't believe people are eminentizing the eschaton. What is your opinion of Chabad and the Temple Institute?" I mean, I know a little bit about Chabad. I don't, but I don't think that they believe in the end times. I think that they have a different, prophecy. So what they are attempting to do is, it cannot be considered eminentizing the eschaton or immanentizing the eschaton. They are simply trying to bring about what they consider to be progress and a better world. So I don't know of anybody who is actively trying to end the world. Fuad Muhammad says, "Sorry, I can't find your father versus Chomsky anywhere." No problem. I couldn't either. Maybe it doesn't exist. Manster Bear says, "I have a Schofield Bible from when I was a kid. Didn't know much when I picked it." Not your fault. What are the issues with it? Basically, a lot of the stuff related to Israel is falsified, and it creates this sort of modern dispensationalist perspective that is more favorable to the Zionist perspective than the original texts reasonably permit in translation. I'm not big into worrying about the translations. I mean, I would no more read a Schofield Bible or the Book of Mormon in the place of a regular Bible. But, I think anything is decent. Some people complain about the NIV and so forth, but honestly, Whether I'm reading the Bible in Italian or in English, the fundamental message is the same. I don't get overly caught up, probably because I am multilingual. I really don't get caught up into these minute discussions of precise definitions, because I don't believe human language permits that sort of thing, especially when we're told flat out that we see through a glass darkly. Trying to nail down the precise English translation of the exact Greek or Hebrew, I think, is fundamentally misguided. Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus says you should read Sir John Glubb's essay, The Fate of Empires. I've not only read it, I've posted the entire thing on my blog before years ago. He observes that empires only last about 250 years. The United States is nearing its 250-year mark, and polarization is rampant. That's absolutely true. What Bible is best? Again, I don't have an opinion on that. Just, it's more important that you read the Bible than you worry about the precise translation. I have a copy of the Vulgate. If you want to, if you want to get all picky and particular about translations, fine. Read the Latin Vulgate. You see, that's not useful information. That's not useful advice. Just read it. And if you're concerned about the translation, then read 2 other translations, and you'll get a better understanding of the concepts from triangulating those 3 translations than you will from just reading any one anyhow. Quinn Upstate says, Dark Lord will consume your soul, be gone. Really, banning you from the channel's about as extreme as I get. Silver Sister Hippie Chick says, you're so vain, I bet you think this stream is about you. You're so vain, I bet you think this stream is about you, don't you? The funny thing is, I don't think this stream is about me. It's just about the ideas that we're here to discuss. Christopher G said, what is your opinion of the ideas of a global currency reset and currency revaluation? I don't think it matters. I don't think it's the problem is not the currency per se. The problem is the debt. The problem is the demographics. The problem is the population. It's this is not, money is about keeping score, and the keeping score is not the problem. Changing the score is not going to change the situation. Changing the map does not change the territory. Charles Carlson says, which empire was most similar to the U.S. empire? Also, thanks for all the free content you put out. You're welcome, of course, and thanks to all of you who support both this channel as well as Unauthorized TV. It's really going amazingly well, and all the creators that are involved are very, very happy with the level of support they're getting from you guys. Which empire was most similar? It's not the Roman, it's not the Chinese, it's not the Aztec. I would say that I would look at the Athenian, either the Athenian or the British Empire. Those are the 2 empires that I see as being the most similar. If I was looking at the lessons of how they fell apart, when I look at the way that the Athenian Empire engaged in, was really throwing its weight around all over the place, really for no reason, and then got in over its head in Sicily and rendered itself weak enough that it was eventually defeated by Sparta. That's what the U.S. looks the most like to me in that sense. Durlex Sedlex said, gun grabs in New Zealand aren't getting far. Less than 100 were collected last I saw, and contractors can't find enough pipe for plumbing jobs. Gee, I wonder what the Kiwis are doing with that. Well, yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do when things are potentially going to get difficult is give up your weapons. So the question is, are people in New Zealand going to be willing to do what people in Scotland and England were not, which is actually fight to keep their weapons? I don't know about that. Muffhead says, hello, Vox. In the U.S., it seems the only whites reproducing are evangelicals. Well, that's probably true because, you know, Christianity provides hope. And you need to have hope to take the risk of marrying someone, to take the risk of having children. You know, we did a, back our Bible study in Minnesota. I think the average number of children was over 4. You know, there's one family I know of that has 8 children plus 1 adopted. So, when you have hope, you have marriage and children. But, you know, Americans have been demoralized and de-Christianized, and so they lack hope. How would you rate our odds of making a new Christ-based nation? Oh, I think it's inevitable. I think there will be a Christian nation somewhere in the United States. I just don't think that the United States itself will survive, nor would it be a Christian nation, because I don't think Christians are willing to impose. You know, for all that atheists shriek and worry about Christian identity and theocracy and this and that and the other thing, Christians clearly have no interest in doing that. They will let the entire thing fall apart rather than take it over and fix it. Defiance Bear says, do you have any examples of nations averting the types of things we're seeing now after starting the path seemingly to collapse? Well, the Roman Empire managed to avoid collapse on at least 3 occasions that I can think of. Of course, they needed a pretty strong dictator to do so. So, I mean, that's one reason why people anticipate dictatorship, because that's what tends to prevent complete collapse. You know, that's Napoleon prevented the revolution from completely collapsing. Diocletian prevented the Roman Empire from completely collapsing. So, you know, that's kind of the alternative, but I don't see that happening in the U.S. This is the second time you've asked me about Kanitshianis's work. I've never read it. I don't know who he is. You don't need to keep asking me about that. So, okay, and then now we're caught up, more or less. Let's see. Frosty the Bear says, I'm a baby Christian. I've acquired many Bible translations, including a facsimile of the 1611 King James Version. Old English is a pain. Minor differences. Primary message remains unchanged. Love God, love your neighbor, read the gospel. God bless you all. That's precisely right. I mean, that's exactly my perspective. Is yes, one translation might be a little bit more technically accurate than another one to the best of our understanding, but we don't have a perfect understanding of what God meant precisely by any one thing. And so, you know, just trying to think that you're going to pick the one perfect translation and then that is going to give you the maximal understanding, I think is just a false idea. There's a reason why Paul talks about needing the Holy Spirit to understand. You know, God does talk to us not just through his word, but also through our conscience. And so, you know, and the more that these things are in harmony, the more confident that you can be that you understand God's will, God's truth with regards to that particular issue or situation. You know, when people get into the whole exegesis thing, and they try to really, really boil down into what, this specific sentence and this specific word means and everything. I think that entire approach is incorrect. I think it's false, and I think it ends up being misleading. What do you think about the current Pope? I don't like his vibe. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I think that, I have massive, massive, massive doubts about him. Shocklin Senta says, snack money for the doggo's favorite treat. Condition update, please. He's doing great. He was running around like a madman all morning. His favorite thing in the world is to be chased. And our other dog just doesn't chase him very often. He's not interested in that. But the new Ridgeback, the puppy, likes to chase him. And so he's like living the dream. And, so he's up to 41, 42 kilos, which is as heavy as he's ever been. He's not quite as muscular as he should be. He's still a little bit soft because we fed him up so much. But he's really doing great, and I really appreciate all the prayers for him. And I'd actually appreciate prayers for one of the kids who's been going through some medical stuff and has some treatment tomorrow. So hopefully that will go fine and without incident. My knee is doing great. It's still immobilized. It'll be immobilized until Monday, but I had to take the brace off to take a shower, and I was actually shocked when I inadvertently bent my knee a bit, and it didn't hurt at all. So I'm actually quite optimistic that I'll be back on the field by the end of the month. And in fact, I'm not even going to miss a game this weekend because they canceled it. Or they had to delay it. So it's all cool. I will do a bark stream soon. But yeah, things are going generally pretty well. And, I did not know Trent Reznor, but I did enjoy the first two Nine Inch Nails albums. Let's see. Hey Vox, I was raised Irish Catholic. Why do non-denominational Christians care about the Pope? Because he's, the primary religious figure for a big group of Christian brothers. I mean, I'm not opposed to Catholics in any way. I live in Italy. I even occasionally attend a Catholic church. Because there's one in town, and sometimes there's a event or something. Why would I not care? Why would we not want the Catholics to have the best Pope they can? Durlex Sedlex says, when you had Voxiversity on Freestarter, you had hardcovers of SJWs Always Lie and SJWs Always Double Down as backer rewards. Yeah, I actually still have a few here. We'll get, once we're better about getting Voxiversities out, we'll open up the subscriptions again. Dylan Summers sends $1. Thank you. TB88 says, art student. Just bought a Throne of Bones audio. Any character's portrait you want to see in particular? Might take a while. Been busy, but looking for practice. I think people would love to see Marcus Valerius. They'd love to see Theuderic. Maybe the Severus. There's, I think there's a lot of interest in those. Penny H said, "Hi Vox, curious if you've read Jack White's Dream of Eagle series. I have not read it, no. Subscribe to Unauthorized TV, fabulous content. Excellent, thank you. Love SJW's Always Double Down, partway through A Throne of Bones. I'm a new fan." Well, welcome, Penny. I'm glad to hear it. Daniel says, "I'd be interested in you writing more nonfiction work, and with your vast knowledge, especially books on history or cycles. By the way, just ordered Return of the Great Depression and can't wait to read it." Yeah, I'm working on fiction now. I need to get A Sea of Skulls done. So that's the big focus right now. So, I still have some here. Shut up and take my money. That's funny. Why do Euro-Italians seem to be so much more intelligent than their North American cousins? Well, they were the ones who had the brains to stay in Italy, I guess. Spent a few days in Tuscany, and the cultural IQ differences were shocking. Most of the Italians who went over there came from like Sicily and Calabria and that sort of thing. I don't think you had a lot of people coming over from Tuscany and Milano. Patrick says, "Can the nation be extended by marriage even outside the race?" Not as a whole. I can see the argument for title to the nation being constituted as the founding families, but can we extend it further than that? Well, that was the idea, but it hasn't worked out too well. So I would say not really, not on a large scale. So, but I don't make the rules. I'm just passing on my observations. Clark Smith says, "Hi Vox, great show tonight. I'm really glad I discovered you. I admire your intellect and the ease at which you answer questions and make your points. Just curious, are you a NHL fan?" No. I used to be a North Stars fan, but I lost interest in the NHL after they moved. I mean, my dad is actually friends with the guy who owns the Minnesota Wild. It was not impossible that he would have been involved with that at one point, but just not into that. Dylan Summers says, "Only 200 pages into Throne of Bones and can't help but picture Corvus looking like you." That's not what I would have thought, but okay. I mean, I'm not one of those writers who writes himself into all his books, In fact, the one character, the two character of the two characters that I probably most identify with, one of them would almost certainly surprise you. Great Odin's Raven says, "TB88, get a hold of The Last Witch King, also almost as important in my opinion." Yeah, I mean the Summa Helvetica and other stories has all those stories. So, and then Iamblicus 2 asks, "Vox, did you watch the clip of the man rush the stage during Judeo Peterson's latest speech at Liberty University? Very interesting. JP started crying." Well, he always cries. No, I haven't. I heard about that, but I haven't seen it. To be honest, I'm kind of done with Jordan Peterson. I figured him out. I wrote the book. He's officially boring, as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of funny because people people will say, "Oh, you're so obsessed. You're so obsessed," and they're almost always surprised by how completely I lose interest in something after I feel like I'm done with it. So, anyhow, well, I will let you go, but thank you so much for tuning in tonight. If you haven't checked out Unauthorized TV, I'd encourage you to do that. We're adding content all the time, so if you'd like to support it by subscribing, that would be cool. And otherwise, I wish you a good evening. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.